Hello my friends, good morning. This is Rob Hopkins here, speaking to you from my house in Totnes in Devon, and I actually spent about a quarter of an hour today trying very hard listening to Google a thing that speaks in different languages to try and pronounce the name of the fantastic looking event that you're all at today, and I just couldn't get it at all, so I apologise for that. If I had tried to say it, I might well have injured myself in some sort of a way. So anyway, hello, it's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to be able to present something to your fantastic event today. I hope you've had a really good day so far, and will continue to do so. I always found, whenever I've been to the Netherlands and spent time with the transition groups there, that actually there is a very particular sense of dynamism, of creativity, of possibility in the groups there, which is something that I bring home really inspired by. So thank you for all the work that you do and all the work you've done so far, and I hope that today is giving you a really powerful kind of a sense of why it matters to be part of a movement, of what you can get from being part of a movement, of the power of us all kind of sharing our learnings and our experiences. And one of the things that I always reflect on in terms of transition is about tipping points and where those tipping points are, and that we never know quite where we're going to find those tipping points. And sometimes we imagine we have to get everybody in the Netherlands on board, or everyone in our community on board, or a certain amount of people. Actually, in different places you see those tipping points in very different ways. So here we're starting to see government talking much more about community energy, not as a result of the government having an idea of community energy, but just because people, transition groups and other community groups have just got on and started community energy projects all over the place. Local currencies now we see starting to really gain a momentum, and in part just because people again have just got on with it. And here the Bank of England recently published a paper about local currencies, but basically trying to catch up with what people like yourselves have just got on and done. And so for me those tipping points are really interesting. And for me, what we see in transition is really ordinary people producing really extraordinary change all around the world. And sometimes it's easy, when you're just reading all the kind of bad news and stuff, to just think nothing's really changing. But I wanted to share just a few things that I've noticed recently that really feel to me like something really interesting is shifting. And one of those is this. So this is the famous £10 note from Brixton, and this is something which, just this thing alone, this piece of paper, this design, I do a lot of talks in different parts of the world, and actually the number of times I've just held this note up and it's got a round of applause just on its own. I don't think it's just David Bowie fans, but actually there is something really powerful about story and about design. And I was in Paris a few months ago, and there were two mayors who came along to an event there, and the thing they wanted most was to have their photographs taken with the David Bowie £10 note. And so for me there's something really important about how we design this stuff, how we present this stuff, the kind of the stories that we tell. The second thing is, I was reading recently about a council here in England in a city called Preston, who did a whole analysis where they looked at where they were spending their money and where the other key organisations who made up the local economy were spending their money as well. And they found that the vast majority of what they were spending was all just pouring out of the local economy. Not something that would be news to myself or to any of you, but for them it was a real revelation. They realised that of all the money, the £350 million they spent every year, only 4% was actually spent in the town, and only 39% was spent in the whole region, in the whole county. So all that money, £488 million a year, were just pouring out through that local economy. And it really got them thinking about, well, how are we going to do things in a different way? How could we rethink this? And it's really driving, very similar to the work that transition groups have been doing with economic blueprints. It's really started to change the way that they're thinking. So those ideas that are coming through transition, the more and more we talk about them, the more they get out into more and more mainstream places. They start to affect people like those people in that city council, looking to do things in new ways, in different ways, picking up these ideas, being inspired by these ideas. The third one for me is a project that I'm involved with, which is very close to my heart, which is the Atmos project here in Totnes, where as a community we have taken on an old milk factory, an 8-acre derelict site, and I'm bringing it into community ownership with the community as the driver for what takes place on that site. And what we've been doing over the last few months is doing all the consultation with people about what's going to happen there. And it's been really extraordinary to see, actually, when you really ask people genuinely, what do you want to see happen here? They come forward with all the stuff that we know from doing transition for the last 7 or 8 years, other things we need to do, more affordable, low carbon, local materials, training and skilling, all these sorts of things. And actually this is the development where we're able to do it. But the current model doesn't provide any of the things that people actually want. So there's an incredible thing that I see in the Atmos project of how it starts to change people's sense of what's possible. So other developers, other landowners in the area looking at Atmos and going, that's interesting. We never thought of doing it that way. And it changing people's expectation of what they think is acceptable as well in the town in terms of other developments that are being put forward, which is really interesting. Another story I heard recently was about in Exeter, which is a city near me, where they want to launch a local currency, and rather than going to the kind of alternative shops or the transition people, one of the first people they tried to get involved was their local rugby club, who are a big in the Premier League of rugby, Exeter Chiefs, and Exeter Chiefs are going to be hosting some of the Rugby World Cup next year. So so it's Transition Exeter, the Exeter Pound. So the rugby club agreed that they would accept the Exeter Pound, and the Exeter Pound are going to produce a special £15 note to celebrate the World Cup coming to Exeter. And it's a really interesting way of bringing on board and working with a whole load of people who normally wouldn't really get involved with transition. So there's a kind of a maturity of that approach that I think is really interesting. Also, it's been fascinating the last few months to see how transition is taking off in South America. We've got now transition groups, national hubs in Brazil and in Chile, trainings in Argentina, stuff popping up all over the place. So for me, there's something, and there's many other things, things where you can just get a sense that transition is that idea that we need to come back to local economies, that rather than just giving away our local independence, our local sovereignty, our local democracy to big organisations who come in and push all the small people out of the way, actually that we turn that around and actually we see the small, the independent, the local as the foundation on which we then go on to build a new economy. And that idea, that different way of looking at things, and arguing that it starts with the community, that you can't create a human scale economy without starting with the local community. You can't do good development, good housing without starting with the local community, for me is the cutting edge idea of our times now. You are the cutting edge of our times now. And it comes back, I think, to that idea, the paper that came out recently to say that of all the fossil fuels that we know of in the world, we have to leave 2/3 of them underground. That's a huge challenge. And I've recently been reading this awful book called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels, which I really don't recommend to anybody. And it's a book which argues that that we have to keep using fossil fuels because fossil fuels are the thing which is going to enable humanity to flourish, and that actually the only way to deal with climate change, although for him climate change isn't really a problem, the only way to really tackle it is to use more fossil fuels in order to kind of protect us from the risks of fossil fuels. Of course, there really is no moral case for fossil fuels, and so for me the interesting question is about, if we're going to leave 2/3 of fossil fuels underground, what can we create overground? And still, after 7, 8, 9 years now of doing transition, the insights, the conversations that your transition groups have initiated and have created are really on the cutting edge again of those conversations. Actually, if we ignore people like this and we get on with the idea that 2/3 of the fossil fuels are staying under the ground, so what can we create above ground, then that creativity, that imagination, that brilliance that transition invites so beautifully is something where you guys are really ahead of government or ahead of business, and that's something really important, I think. That move from linear economies to circular economies to economies built around a multiplier effect, this is really the time to do that. And transition does something. There was a quote I was going to read you where in Tooting in London, the woman I spoke to there, she said, we look to involve not just the community of Tooting, but the communities of Tooting. So that thing of really how transition tries to draw everybody together, and there are some beautiful examples, I think, of that now, of all kinds of, and I'm sure you see it in your work and in your communities too. So for me, what transition does, what you guys are doing that's really so important, is bringing an attitude of service, bringing the idea of working in a compassionate way to these enormous challenges. I recently went to see the film Selma about Martin Luther King, and there's a beautiful bit at the beginning where he talks about the civil rights movement being motivated by dignity. And it feels to me that transition in the same way is motivated by dignity, is motivated by a sense that our cultures, our communities, our family, our friends are in crisis, that the world around us is in crisis. We nowadays, newspapers in the UK start to talk about the epidemic of loneliness. Well, what do we do about that? And how can we tackle all these bigger challenges at the same time? And so for me, those things that you're doing in your communities that may feel small are actually a huge part of this puzzle. If we can join them all up, share the learnings, as you're doing so beautifully with your national network there. And while they may feel like small things, it's essential, it's vital that you keep doing them, and that those things keep moving forward. That we have a movement which has enough of a sense of humour to produce a £21 note like we have here in Totnes, that is able to do those kind of playful things that you really, and take those risks that you really can't do if you're a government or a big business or whatever. We need a movement which is able to look after each other, which is able to have much, much lower, if any, levels of burnout, as opposed to many other similar kind of social change organisations I've been in. Where we're able to support and build resilient groups, resilient organisations, where transition is the movement that has the best parties, the best celebrations, that really enables people to feel like they're some part of something really deeply historic, which is changing all around us. So I'm really sorry that I can't be there in person with you, because I know that Dutch transition groups throw the best parties and have the best beer, and that's something that I always really enjoy coming for. So I'm sorry I can't be there in person. I'm sure you'll have a fantastic day, and I just want to say that to say thank you really for the incredible work that you do, for the dedication that you put into transition, for the stories that you generate, that you're able to tell, and to reassure you that the stories that come out of projects you're doing go all around the world. There is an international movement of people figuring this out together, and it's the stories, it's the like our David Bowie £10 note, these things, they just go all over the world. So to salute what you're doing, to say that here in Totnes, here in the thousands of transition groups around the world, we stand in solidarity with you and in admiration of the great work that you're doing, and we look forward to doing so for many years to come, and to the real changes, the real historic changes that we're already starting to see as this quiet, gentle revolution of transition spreads around the world. So have a fantastic event. Thank you for the invitation to speak, and I'll see you all soon, I'm sure. Bye-bye.